Centre for Inquiry, Canada's premier venue for secular humanists, atheists, skeptics, and free thinkers.
I'd like to introduce our speaker for the evening tonight, Dr. Ian McGregor. Dr. McGregor is an associate professor of personality and social psychology in the Faculty of Health at York University. His experimental research on conviction and zeal is internationally acclaimed, published in the top scientific journals, and funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. His most recent research reveals social factors and personality traits that combine to cause political and religious extremism. So please help me in welcoming Dr. Ian McGregor.
So I'm really excited to be here. I didn't even know this existed, and I checked out the website when I found out I was going to give this talk, and I thought, you know, this website, I found instant affinity, and it looked a lot like the website of the church that I go to. And then I realized, oh man, if I tell people that I go to a church, this is going to cause some kind of some eyebrow flicks. And indeed, that was why I was invited, I think, because I gave a talk in Waterloo at a Unitarian church where the minister is an atheist. And there was a member of the CFI who was there who found out that how could a minister be an atheist? Is there a holy atheism? And then they found out that I was maybe, I guess by some definitions, an atheist, but still religious. And so this is a really fun, thoughtful group to give this talk to, and I welcome your feedback and interruptions and comments afterwards and during. The title of the talk is stolen from a book by Greta Vosper, who you might have heard about this book, and I was excited when I saw this book because it was a response to a critique, popular critique that's recycled some critiques of a certain version of religion. And Greta Vosper's, I think, is a sort of a way forward. And the reason I'm motivated to understand this is because I appreciate religion. I really like religion. I had good experiences with religion. And some of my best friends and family members are religious. And I think they're living lives of integrity that is propelled and inspired by their religious faiths. But I'm also a scientist in an academic department where we're all atheists. And so I appreciate that perspective as well, and I appreciate empirical science. And so I do mind the gap. I mind the gap between atheism and belief. And I've been minding it for 15 years with over 100 experimental studies with over 10,000 participants, trying to study this phenomenon of religious conviction, a certain kind of religious conviction. And I'm starting to get a pretty good sense of what's going on. And so I want to share that with you today, and then make some partially speculative and partially grounded in my research suggestions for how we might find a way forward for belief and atheism, and how we can each actually perhaps do better with the help of each other's side. Okay, so this was my, this mouse is not going to reach where I want to stand to not get feedback. How's this? Yeah, back over there? Over the side? Okay. Are we going to feedback over here? Okay. This is my experience of religion growing up. Okay, I grew up as the son of a Baptist minister, and I went to a really nice Baptist church. And it was like, this is the scene from Dr. Seuss's Grinch Stole Christmas, you know, where the Who's are wahoo, 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 wahoo. And it's a beautiful picture, you know, there's beautiful nature in the background, awe-inspiring mountains, people humbly gathered together multi-generationally, inspired by a central sparkler of some sort. It's not really clear what the sparkler is or what this central ideal is. But I remember as a kid finding this to be a really nice scene, and I still find it kind of inspiring today. And this was like my Baptist upbringing. I remember the church we went to was very nice people who were very kind, and it's an extended family. There was a little bit of uncertainty about what this sparkler in the middle was, something about Jesus. It was poetic, it was a lot of stories involved, but for most North American Protestant denominations in this, growing up in the 60s and 70s, it was sort of a watered down, pro-social, be nice kind of thing. And Jesus was kind of the superhero that was, you know, presented as the figure. And I still have joy dreams about this experience. I have these great dreams where I wake up just feeling completely saturated with joy, hovering in the sanctuary of this church. You know, there was baptisms where people would commit their life to they dedicate their life to a life of service of a high ideal. And Jesus was wrapped up with that, and you know, there's all sorts of theological stuff, but the essence of it was this hopeful pro-social process of turning away from a selfish life and trying to have a more committed pro-social life. And the organ would be playing, and the choir would be singing, "I have decided to follow Jesus," and people would be all emotional. I remember being emotional. Okay, so then I turned 10, and you know, the obvious things started happening. I hit up against the, you know, usual frustrating answers from dogmatic religious people, and so I wandered away from the faith, like all of you have probably. And but I think the gist of this talk is that, are we going to throw the baby out with the baptismal water, you know? And I think maybe we shouldn't, and that the phenomenon that we're discarding with the help of our sometimes angry atheism is not really the essence of religion. It's a distortion of religion that has focused on belief as the axis of faith. And that's a historical aberration, especially according to people like Karen Armstrong, who's done historical analysis of various kind of religious trends. And in all the big monotheistic religious traditions, she notices that they veer towards a militant and dogmatic emphasis on belief or non-belief when they're under periods of anxiety. So, and she argues that Western Christianity right now is in an extreme period of this transformation, this distortion into an emphasis on belief. And we're right to agitate against that and discard that, but we shouldn't discard religion. It's more like we're almost kind of fighting against a straw man. And the essence of religion is something different. Now, I went to your website and I saw this picture here. That's a great picture. It's better than the smokestack picture, I thought. The other one, the CFI with the flame, looks a bit like a smokestack. I thought this one was more inspiring. It's like, yes, we can. I felt, yeah. And this flame here is the symbol from our religious tradition I belong to, Unitarian Universalism. And is that, you guys know what this is? Who knows? Okay. It sounds a bit like a cult, and I'm really embarrassed by the name of it. So we usually talk about going to that Sunday thing or whatever. And I won't bore you with the history of it. You can look it up on the web if you're interested. But it's actually, I propose a merger between CFI and Unitarian Universalism. The websites are almost identical. I mean, some of the earliest founders of Unitarian Universalism were inspired by Enlightenment secular humanism. So I'm on board with the mission of secular humanism. It just happens that through our church, they're trying to do this through a church-like venue. And this is what's trying to be, this is like truth and compassion, flame of justice, truth and compassion, supported in the bowl of community, the supportive community of a church environment. Okay? The CFI has, this is more of a rugged individualistic quest for truth. You know, nothing is sacred, right? Well, the Unitarian Universalists, we feel that way too, nothing is sacred. And there's about half of our members are atheists. But I think there's some benefit still of retaining the communal religious trappings. But I think we can learn a lot from CFI, because CFI is nice and edgy. It's got an edge, it's got a better affiliation with the universities. But I think maybe CFI can learn from religions as well, and I think we should merge and have a better phenomenon. But let me get into the talk, and maybe you'll agree or disagree. This is what we come to at the worst. This is academia, by the way. This is the quest for truth. Wait, go back. I can't go back on this thing, but the quest for truth is. But this is how it ends up a lot. The solitary, rugged, individualistic, twisting in the wind, questing for truth, with no community. It's a far cry from the wahoo wahoo experience that religion can offer at its best. So now, I can't go back here, but this is the wahoo wahoo experience that people are gravitating towards now. This is Rick Warren's megachurch, Saddleback Church, and a lot of, I've given versions of this talk to atheist groups before, and a lot of them wince at the wahoo wahoo thing. You know, the communal, cloying, emotional, charismatic garbage that distorts true reason and logic. And I think the reason that this kind of, let me see if I can go back here, the reason that that this has gotten such a bad name and that people have decided to jettison religion is because of this. This is the modern distortion of religion, that part of the communal rapture or ecstasy is a bankrupting of intellectual integrity. But I think we can get back to this and have our cake and eat it too. So, but anyways, because of this sort of partly this distaste for the academic or the intellectual compromises that contemporary religion demands, there's a real appeal to this new atheism. It's just nothing really new. It's recycling some of the old critiques against religion. And it's kind of like a Grinch experience on the Wahoo Wahoo. You know, it's like, just stay away from religion altogether. It's dangerous, it sucks you in, it's charismatic, before you know it, you've lost your mind, and you're, you know, it's pathetic, and it's against truth. So this is where this book that I just read by Greta Vosper comes in, With or Without God, because it was, in a sense, she's saying, yeah, these new atheists are right. The cast of characters, you know, Sam Harris, Dawkins, the other two. Yeah, of course they're right. We've known they're right since, you know, for hundreds of years. And they're coming back, and the current modern distortion of religion, focusing on militant and dogmatic truth, is sad. And it needs to be, the bluff needs to be called. It's time. Okay, so she says, yeah, she's a minister, by the way, at church here in Toronto, United Church minister. So she says, let's get on with it. Let's acknowledge that the authoritative Word of God for all time business is a load of crap that's just, it's outdated. And let's get on with acknowledging what religion really is. And it's about trying to find a way to inspire ourselves to live committed lives in the service of high values. Well, that sounds a lot like secular humanism, right? So she's kind of like, hey, wait, we can still be, you know, have our, we can have all the goodies of religion and not have to be Grinch-like. So we don't have to sort of compromise our intellect. Okay, so what I want to try and convince you of in this talk is that ideals are the essence of religion, not superstition. Okay? Then if we acknowledge that ideals are the essence of religion, that the power of ideals is the essence of religion, then that empowers secular humanism as well, but it also allows us perhaps to benefit from some of the extra idealistic aspects of religion that might help secular humanism do better. Because we're losing, in case you haven't noticed, to charismatic religion. Right? All the liberal churches are declining in membership, and the charismatic conservative churches that involve emotion and communal participation are thriving. Okay? So that's the intro. Let me get now into the guts of the research that I've been doing, the theoretical and the empirical aspect of my research, to try and convince you that there's a basic motivational, even neurological need for ideals for humans. Okay? And if we understand these very basic motivational levers, then maybe we can more effectively move them for our secular humanistic movement. Okay, it starts with this basic predicament here. Here's this mouse. This mouse is hungry. It's going foraging for food. It's like us. We're going through approaching our daily goals, and we're absorbed in our goals. Just like this mouse is absorbed in approaching food. But as with our daily goals, for whether it's for success or love or whatever it is, oftentimes we smell the possibility of failure or conflict. And in this case, this mouse smells a cat. Okay, they actually do a lot of these studies with scent of cat smeared on a mouse cage. So the mouse is foraging, happily for food, and all of a sudden, scent of cat, right? So it's still approaching the food, but now it's got a conflict. Approach the food, avoid the cat. Now, what happens then? Conflicted approach, and part of the brain, anterior cingulate cortex, initiates a cascade of anxiety-related symptoms. One of them is anxious vigilance. Okay, so smells a cat, rears up, scans for possible cat, continues to forage haltingly for its food. And the purpose of this anxiety system is that it is usually adaptive, because this animal can now say, oh, smells like cat over here, can vigilantly forage, continue to forage and look for somewhere else where it might not be so fraught with possible smell of cat. And it can go, and then once the smell of cat is gone, it can then resume eager absorption in its pursuit of food in a non-compromised way. Okay, this is the basic goal regulation process. That's usually adaptive. But this mouse, whoops. This mouse is in a cage, so it can't escape. From an existentialist perspective, there's no exit. Just like us in our cages with death perched on the top of our cages, we can't really escape, right? So it's a constant approach avoidance conflict for this mouse. And what animals do when they're in these unescapable approach avoidance conflict states for a long time with this anxiety churning is they turn to displacement behaviors. Okay, so as some rats, when made anxious, will run so eagerly on a treadmill that they'll starve. It feels so good. It's palliative to run, and they'll just starve. Or cats will lick themselves to the point of skin lesions. You've probably seen this in your dogs when they'll just bark and bark and bark, or they'll lick themselves. And tail chasing is another one. Obsessive vocalization at no apparent object. These are the kinds of things that zookeepers track and use as indices of captivity-induced anxiety. And they will prescribe anxiolytics to their animals to help relieve their symptoms. Okay, so these displacement behaviors are very common in other animals, and sometimes we do them too. It's rarer for us to lick ourselves to the point of lesions, but sometimes we'll exercise compulsively or other things. But what I'm going to try and propose here is that ideals for humans serve the same purpose. And they can be palliative and eagerly approached. We can approach ideals in the privacy of our own minds without any resources, and that it can confer the same kind of benefits as these other displacement behaviors. Okay, and to understand this, you need to understand most models of goal regulation in humans which posit that ideals or meanings, values, worldviews, self-guides, or whatever, are high-level abstract goals that guide more concrete goals. So they're usually instrumental. Okay. But they can still be approached. So they're goals. Okay, this is the key here. They're goals, but they can also be approached for their own sake, for palliative benefit, just like animals can do other displacement behaviors when they're anxious. Okay, so this is another way of putting the model, and I'll explain here more why ideals are so fundamental for us, is that whenever we have uncertainty-related threats, we're in a conflict situation, we want to approach something, but there's avoidance cues at the same time. A lot of our life is like this. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty in our important goals, our relationship goals, or our career goals. This causes an approach-avoidance conflict. You know, because should we go or should we not go? And the cascade of anxiety-related symptoms, which is not very pleasant. And so one way to respond to this is to have some kind of ideology or some kind of ideals to approach eagerly. And once you approach them, you get this kind of, you see that the threat kind of disappears. And the reason this is there's a basic neural process related to approach motivation where if you're approaching something eagerly, actively approaching something, you get kind of like neural blinders on, like this horse. And it's adaptive, right? If you're a dog, you're chasing a squirrel, you're about to catch it. It wouldn't be, you know, let's say you're a hungry dog and you can eat the squirrel, chasing a dog, and you're just about to pounce on it, and it wouldn't be adaptive. Oh, maybe kibble, right? That wouldn't be, so it's adaptive to have this kind of tunnel vision, automatic cognitive tunnel vision when you're eagerly engaged in approach of an important goal. Okay, but it's nice to have this too as a buffer for anxiety. Whenever you're feeling anxious, you can turn to your most important ideals and relieve your distress. Okay. I suspect this might be why, for a long time, philosophers from Pythagoras to Aristotle have proposed that highest happiness comes from contemplating abstract ideals. Other animals have to lick themselves or run on a treadmill or chew off their whiskers. But we can just conjure up and promote ideals in the privacy of our own mind without any physical resources required. Okay? Just think about them and imagine them. Yeah?
This is absolute truth. Religion claims to have absolute truth.
Yeah.
So which absolute truth?
That's a great point. That's the thing. The point that I'm going to try to make in this talk is that these ideals are agnostic. They can attach to, you can attach them to whatever you want to attach them to. They don't have to be attached to supernatural things. They just have to be highest goods. And people like Karen Armstrong argue that that's how religion actually, many religions started, was focusing on sort of expressions of highest human ideals, and then they kind of warped into more dogmatic expressions of belief or not belief. Just hang on to that, because that's going to be a theme later on in the talk, is the malleability of ideals. Okay, so one way that these ideals can be morphed is towards the ideal of myself as great. I'm great. Okay? And this is a classic psychological idea. Here's a bunch of psychologists. The classics you probably had in your early psych courses is Freud, Adler, Karen Horney, Erich Fromm, Bowlby, Carl Rogers. All these folks in some way propose that when people are made to feel anxious, they highlight impossibly grandiose ideals about themselves as a way to submerge the anxiety. Okay? So they focus on self-ideals. Okay? This is one of the malleable directions that ideals can take. And this provides some immediate relief, but it's not sustainable, right? It's not sustainable because a collection of narcissists has a hard time getting along too well. Or you can go to fascist ideology. You can have the group as the ideal. And the fascist ideology also has the benefit of having collective support. It's kind of like, you know, church gone mad. There's Putin there with his in the bottom corner. I can't resist putting that picture up. Okay, and this is a classic theme that even makes it into, you know, it's Darth Vader here. He's an anxious, vulnerable guy who fell into a volcano and burned his head, and then he's this fascist, you know, hard exterior, grandiose, and all this stuff, and all these followers, right? It's a pretty hackneyed theme. Okay, so now this is probably what most of you think of religion. It's it's another iteration of this kind of stupid, self-serving, rigid kind of idealistic focus. And William James kind of agrees in his classic Varieties of Religious Experience. He said that people use religious rapture to help get rid of self-related conflict because it engrosses the interest, just like approach motivation does. And then he, in his summary of interviews with religious converts, their metaphors are all about this eager approach of their ideals, alacrity of the soul, infinite strength, endless vitality, vigor, freedom, courage, buoyancy, walking on air, swimming in beams of the sun, soaring on eagle's wings. This is what converts are feeling. Okay, and you're probably thinking, yeah, because they're so stupid, they're going for these you know, ridiculous, mindless ideals. Well, I think what's going on there is that various versions of religious conviction activate approach motivation and the tunnel vision freedom from anxiety that can make us feel liberated and free. Okay, but what I'm going to try and argue in this talk is that it doesn't have to be superstitious or silly. Okay, and this is indeed what Karen Armstrong argues in some of her books, Great Transformation and most recently The Case for God, where she tries to respond to the new atheists by saying, yes, but you're attacking a distortion of religion. What religion is, at least partially, essentially tried to be about is compassionate ideals, pro-social ideals for the human good. And yeah, they've been distorted in various ways, just like, you know, beautiful sex can get distorted into rape, but just because there's rape doesn't mean there's not such a thing as good sex. She doesn't use that analogy, but that's her point. Okay, so in the research that we've been doing at York for the last little while, we use various threats to make people uncertain, to see will people, when they're anxious or uncertain, gravitate towards ideals and to approach motivation and to religion. And is the common theme the appeal of idealistic approach motivation when people are anxious? If so, and if we know that, then we can look at this idealistic approach motivation as the true phenomenon that we can bend in any direction we want to, including secular humanism. Okay, so people are asked to read this description of stats, and undergraduate psych students don't like it, and it's also been distorted to be impossible to understand. And we ask them to understand it as if they should, and they get anxious, and this uh-oh, oh no experience happens to them. And then we ask them simply to identify with their religious convictions and say how strongly they, how confident they are, how much do they aspire to live according to them, how objective are their religious beliefs, would other people believe if they understood them. Then they get a little darker. Would you support a war to defend them? Would you give your life to defend them? And are your beliefs more correct than others' beliefs? Okay. And this little 2-minute exposure to this statistics anxiety caused them to shift their religious zeal from 3, which is maybe, to pushing 4, which is yes, for overall religious zeal, and war from around 2, which is no, to 3, which is maybe. Okay, so this is just one little 2-minute anxiety. But is that necessarily, is it just religion that people go to? I don't think so. In this recent study, we found 3 different conditions. People are randomly assigned to these 3 different conditions. One was a hopeless problem. And this is trying to find out, is it really a response to anxiety and conflict? A hopeless problem is negative, but it's not anxious. It's not conflict, right? You've given up. You've slumped. Okay? That's not, if we're understanding the theoretical reason for surging to idealistic reactions, this is not the reason, according to the theory. So this shouldn't cause a surge in meaning quest. Goal frustration, though, however, this has having people think about a goal frustration, should cause a surge, and so should goal conflict, and that's what we found. It was the anxiety-related, uncertainty-related experiences that caused people to exaggerate the, report higher desire to quest for meaning in life. Okay, same thing with religious zeal. It wasn't just trivial uncertainty, just the topic of uncertainty. It was school uncertainty about their school goals or insecurity about their personal goals that caused the surge towards religious zeal. And this is particularly the case for people that were averse to uncertainty in terms of their personalities. So here, for people that were low in personality-related aversion to uncertainty, there was no increase in zeal after an insecurity threat, but it was people who were dispositionally averse to uncertainty and also exposed to this threat who reacted with a spike in religious zeal. Okay, so this is just to try and show you that the theoretical understanding seems to be correct, because it's these very precise levers that are identified by the theory that seem to cause people to go to these extremes. Now, is it approach motivation? If so, people who have approach motivated traits, like eager people, you know, some people are kind of like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, right, who are just bouncy. Should those people be the ones who go for religious zeal when they're threatened with uncertainty? Well, people who are the Eeyores don't do it, but the Tiggers do. Okay? So it's a combination of dislike of uncertainty and being an eager personality that's really the magic bullet for responding to these specific kinds of threats with religious zeal. Trying to get at, it's always good to do a study several different ways so you can really trust your findings. This is one that's kind of been common for a little while, is implicit measures of assessing unconsciously, if you will, whether you're more approach motivated after these threats. And I'm not going to go into the details of this because it would be boring and take too long, but it's just how quickly do you associate yourself with concepts related to approach. And we test with reaction times to categorizing self and approach related words when they're paired together. And so that's the dependent variable here, is the extent to which you associate yourself with approach-related concepts. So there's a threatening condition here. This time it was uncertainty about relationships versus control. And here we had to find out if ideals really were an essential element. We didn't prime ideals in this condition, but in this condition we primed people to think about their highest ideals. When ideals weren't primed, this uncertainty threat didn't cause approach motivation, but when ideals were primed, this uncertainty-related threat caused people to all of a sudden associate self with approaching things. That's me. I'm eager. Okay, so just to come at it another way, we hook people up to measure their patterns of brain activation. And this part of the brain here is related to approach motivation, left frontal, in over 100 studies. So it's a pretty good marker of approach motivation. And self-esteem is a trait related to trait approach motivation. People high in self-esteem are high in, they're eager. They tend to be Tigger types. So that was the marker of personality approach motivation. And indeed, people who were low in self-esteem didn't react to these uncertainty-related threats by having evidence of heightened neural approach. But people who were high in approach-related traits, when given the uncertainty threat, reacted with a neural surge in approach motivation. Okay, why? Is it true that this approach is palliative, that it helps to relieve anxiety-related distress? In this study, we assessed approach-related patterns of brain activity and also activity in the part of the brain that begins the anxiety-related cascade, the uh-oh, oh no response. It's the anterior cingulate cortex. Left frontal activation, which is approach motivation, was negatively correlated pretty highly with amplitude of the uh-oh, oh no response. Okay? So the more you are engaged in eagerly approaching something, the less bothered you are by errors and conflicts that cause anxiety. And the correlation was about the same with religious zeal and activity in this anterior cingulate cortex. Okay? So both approach motivation and religious zeal seem to have the same dampening effect on activity in the part of the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, that begins the cascade of anxiety-related experiences. Put this another way, this graph was just a graph showing people who were zealous or not in their religion, and they were given a cause to make a mistake, an anxiety-inducing mistake in the laboratory, and then we saw the extent to which their anterior cingulate cortex had a spike in activity. And you can see the zealous people, the green line, is like, uh-oh, oh no. As the rest of us was, uh-oh. Okay. Importantly in this study, now you might just think, yeah, that's because the religious people were so dumb they didn't realize they'd made a mistake. But actually, the religious people did better on this task than the non-religious people. Okay, so it's not, in this paper we just tried to argue that religion is not the opiate of the masses, it's the Xanax of the masses. It's a nice, we're wired that these ideals will make us less reactive and actually perform better. Okay, so let's say you're with me and you agree that maybe it is something like maybe we're wired to have the appeal of ideals be that they can help us manage the anxiety of everyday life. Then great, let's just do what secular Enlightenment humanism has been trying to do since the Enlightenment, and we'll just promote a secular humanism. We can jettison religion altogether and focus on ideals. Yeah, but I think the problem with I think the secular humanism and my religious affiliation, Unitarian Universalism, has been kind of limping along a little bit since then, compared to the full embodied communal experience of religious participation. Okay, I think this is too often what ends up, as the result of our attempts to live idealistic, good, secular, humanistic lives, freed from the body of religion. I think we need to appreciate the group aspect of religion, because ideals, solitary ideals, are very difficult to hold on to without the support and communal help of a community. Yeah.
What if, say I've come to the realization, I'm not saying it's true, that 9 out of 10 people will never realize truth. and they'll have to be in a religion. And there's no point even trying to convince the 9 out of 10 people because that's who they are.
Yeah.
And we should actually feel good that we are the 1 out of the 10 that actually sees things. And
well, that can make us feel good, and it can fuel our. It can even fuel us kind of almost a narcissistic pride that we're better than if we want, right?
Yeah.
But what I think is, why don't we create a new religion? And the best defense is a good offense. So why not use all the edgy benefits of the CFI and academia and their links and liberal religion, and try to build in something that we're missing to make our movement as appealing as religion. And then I think the only reason people are going there is because there's no alternative. This to help us appreciate this is, who's familiar with Jonathan Haidt's work? Okay, he's recently been trying to help liberals understand conservatives, right? Because most academics are liberals and just don't get it. So it's just like, what the hell? Here is a large sample of the moral values of liberals and conservatives. Liberals are into harm avoidance and justice, but they don't care at all about in-group cohesion, authority, and purity. Conservatives care about the group. These are all the things that keep groups together. Conservatives care about this group stuff as much as the pro-social values of justice and harm avoidance. Okay, so conservatives really care for the group. Is there a way to care for the group that's not jingoistic? Okay, that's our task. That's what we need to figure out. Yeah.
So, like, you talk about liberal versus conservative. How about like how we kind of generally do this with center-left groups?
Yeah, center-left would be, I think, I mean, this is just a very crude cut, right? But I mean, there's different. It was a pretty linear trend. The more liberal you are, the more you don't care about this, and the more conservative you are, the more you care about the groupie kinds of things. These groupie kind of things take on the same kind of sacred values as justice and harm avoidance for liberals. And nothing is sacred. Okay, so the important values. Nothing is sacred except my quest for having nothing sacred. All right. So if we don't figure out some way to build this kind of group-based, I think we're wired. We need to have communal support for our ideals. If we don't, we're going to be twisting slowly in the wind, and this is going to be our competition. So what are we going to do? Well, maybe take a little hint from Obama. Who didn't get a little bit of inspiration and wish you were kind of in one of these rallies? It was pretty moving. The poetry of this guy. So maybe the poetry needs to be involved as well. Some kind of emotional angle. I couldn't resist this. This was a commercial from my childhood, and I remember this. It was for Coke. Remember this one? I'm getting low on time, so I won't play it. But I like to teach the world to sing. It's still moving today. Go Google it. It's on Google, and watch it. And it's for Coke, and you get misty, right? It's for Coke, right? It's that easy, right? And we're missing it. Bono was on top of it. Who was at the U2 concert? Anybody here? Okay, here's Bono, U2 guy. This is the Sky Dome. He had this massive claw, and millions of amps of light coming at you and sounds, and he had the whole Sky Dome singing in unison. Still haven't found what I'm looking for, And then he's trying. Then he tries. Once he gets people all sort of into it emotionally, he tries to bring this message of hope. We're one people. We're the people who stop racism. We're the people who can stop, oppression. Give him points for trying. Okay, he's trying, right? And there's a lot of different ways outside of the churchy way of doing it to build a embodied, communal, emotional, fully human response that can help carry our intellectual and our idealistic values. Okay, so to conclude, I think this is our little flame here, the chalice. This is a little symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the church that I belong to, where half of us are atheists. And there's an attempt to value the communal bit as well, but we often end up being just like academia, where we're just kind of a little arid, a little dry, little cortexes on sticks. Your body's just basically carrying cases for our brains. I suspect perhaps CFI and other secular humanistic movements the ones that I've been involved with so far in my life, have often had the same kind of problem. Little low on the warm and wet. Okay. Well, what we can learn, I think what religion needs to learn from secular humanism, CFI, academia, is to be self-critical, intellectually sincere. Okay. This is what we're offering, and we're proud of this, rightfully so. But what we can learn from religions, I think, is to be accessible to all ages, to be accessible to emotional approaches, to be experiential, to have some way to participate in it beyond just with our brains, emotional, relational, to help build relationships. And this is some of the research on the benefits of church attendance. It's mediated by social support. Enjoy. Okay? Religion is about celebrating, inspiring, and supporting the quest for meaningful living towards ideals. It's a party. It's supposed to be a party. Worship is supposed to be a party celebrating highest ideals. Okay? You might not believe that now because of what you think of religion now, but that's what it's supposed to be. And the liturgy and the sacraments are poetic, artistic symbols to help you experience together the inspiration of, and then to leave there inspired to live according to your ideals. Okay, so I think we really, rather than spending all our time throwing rocks at stupid religious people, I think we can, have our respectful rock throwing, but also learn from what they're doing well, what they've always done well, which is building community and making it accessible to all generations for a lifestyle of support and inspiration for idealistic living towards secular humanistic causes. Okay? And if we could do that, then I think we could really get some traction and ultimately have a better secular humanistic movement. Thanks for your attention.
How can we as atheists or secular humanists separate the good parts of religion that you mentioned earlier away from the impulse of, let's say, some Christians have to prevent condoms being distributed in Africa? What can we do to put a line between those two modes of thought, if anything?
My feeling is that the best defense is a good offense. If we are upset by this kind of political and fundamentalist nonsense that's so popular, and we don't want to stand for it any longer, the impulse to just try and grab it by the throat and say, "Stop it!" is the wrong direction. And what we should do instead is create a movement that will actually be as attractive as that. So then we'll have people in our movement, we can sort of start pulling the political levers instead of fundamentalist Christians pulling the levers, and we can elect our politicians, and etc.
Okay, my next question is, I understand what you said about not showing contempt and ridicule for religion, but didn't Voltaire say that once, and I'm going to butcher this quote, once you can laugh at something, you lose your terror of it? So isn't there a place for that as well?
Well, I mean, maybe it depends whether or not they're around or how publicly you do. But I mean, Voltaire also stayed faithful to his deathbed. I mean, he had a lot of problems, angry problems with religion. He devoted his life to the cause of secular humanism without religion. But personally, he kept his Jesuit faith to his deathbed. So
he also ridiculed religion a lot.
Yeah, he ridiculed. So I think he. I think when he said, if God didn't exist, we'd have to create God. Mm-hmm. I don't think that was so much a snide criticism of God. I think that was a recognition of the need of humans for guiding values. I think he's probably even more frustrated than us, right? I mean, he was coming off the heels of Crusades and other things that are, arguably worse than what's going on now.
Thank you.
I was wondering what is discussed at this church? Is it just like a existential class? Like, I'm not.
Which church?
At I forget the title.
Oh, the Unitarian Universalism Church. Yeah. Well, some of the founders of this church were like Emerson, Thoreau, those guys. They were sort of in the intellectual milieu that went to creating this church, and it was sort of a. I don't want. You know what? It doesn't really matter. The history of it is probably irrelevant. What it actually works out to now, as a psychologist, I'm convinced, it's a club for agreeable, introverted, open to experience people. So people who are trying to find communal inspiration for living better lives. And some churches that I've been to, Unitarian churches, are drab, envelope stuffing kind of lectures where you fall asleep and you leave thinking, why did I go? I could have done a lot better on the internet. And sometimes they're actually enlivened by music and poetry and tight communal supports that are sustenance and inspiration for going out and trying to live your life according to your values that are the very same values. The principles and the values promoted by the Unitarian Church are almost identical to the CFI, except they have this sort of corporate or communal ritualistic celebratory part related to some traditional religious practice as well. So it's like a CFI meeting with hymns or songs and poetry and meditation, candles, sometimes music. Did I say that? Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of following up on that and wanting to hear more how you see a merger would build a movement. And
oh yeah, okay. Thanks for that question. That excites me, that question. Well, I see the Unitarian Universalist Church as floundering because it's so out of style. It's a lot of anachronistic trappings of churches that people, edgy, new people that go there, they go in and think, oh, geez, hymns? Are you kidding me? It's nice to hear some jazz, right? Jazz is sort of more contemporary. A lot of dissonance, that's life, right? Resolution, da, 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 da. That's not so much life anymore. So, yeah, I think, I've only looked at your website. I don't know much about you, but it seems there's a lot of links to academia. I think we've got these great universities that are turning away, dedicatedly trying to create knowledge and integrate it. And you have people in churches that are giving sermons on topics that there's, whole departments on. And, depending on one person to give you your sermon each week. So this format of having different speakers come in, I understand there's links between CFI and universities. I think. Where's the person that asked that question? Where'd you go? I don't know. I got to find out more about the CFI, but it seems to me that it's kind of looking to the future. And churches, I think, I've tried to convince people in our church to change the name for the longest time. It's pathetic. Unitarian Universalism. What is that? It sounds like some kind of cult. It's an in-joke between us and our past. We should call it the, I don't know, Meaningful Living Club or something. I don't know. What'd you say?
God optional.
Yeah, sure. I'd rather just dispense with the whole God thing altogether. And if people want to use some view of God to bolster their meaningful living, that's fine for them. But
just call it philosophy, couldn't you?
I think you might call it, maybe easier to call CFI philosophy than that. There's a corporate experiential aspect that I think might not be well held underneath that term.
Okay, I have one question and one comment. My question is that what is your definition of religion?
Okay, religion, that's a good, there's about as many different definitions as there are kinds, but if you want to go back to the etymology of the word, derives from to bind together or to hold. So even in the definition, it's got an aspect of the communal group binding function of religion. Okay, so I think you can be idealistic in the privacy of your mind, but I think religion requires it's a community gathered together to worship, and worship is a scary, anachronistic term, but I think a better term is to party, to celebrate together, to give inspiration and courage for and joy in the process of living according to ideals. Otherwise, it can become a grim, a rather grim and joyless enterprise. Not necessarily, but I think it can.
Okay, if you think that this is the definition of religion, then I don't see any hope mending the relations between religious and secular thinkers. Because Islam believes, and they want to do it, they want to conquer all over the world. Are you ready for this?
All right, hold on. Islam wants to conquer the world. Oh, well, I mean, this is the problem with all religions, right? There have been phases in most of the major monotheistic religions of conquest and I mean, the Christian Crusades and all that kind of thing. I mean, Islam was late coming to this current militant, dogmatic form. It was one of the last of the monotheisms to succumb to this. If you want to look at the history of the evolution of this kind of closed-minded, militant direction, check out Karen Armstrong's book, Battle for God.
Yeah, the last one is Sikhism. The last one is not Islam.
Yeah, Sikhism. Okay, sure. Yeah.
Okay, my comment. I came from a very strong religious background. I came to Canada 35 years ago. I raised my children here. I raised my children as a secular, and I don't see any problem with them. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your comments.
I think I understand your point. You want to have a religion without the supernatural. So you want to maintain the cultish aspects of religion, but not necessarily belief in the supernatural. And so the question is that necessary or even beneficial?
Okay.
Now, I just got back from spending a month in Belgium, which is one of the most non-religious countries in the world, along with Netherlands and Denmark. It's a situation where roughly half the population are non-believers of some sort or another, and a very insignificant percentage of the population attends church with any regularity at all. Mm-hmm. So those three countries and others, and most of Western Europe, as a matter of fact, is becoming rapidly non-religious, even by your definition.
Yeah.
They don't go to church.
Yeah.
Is there anything wrong with those countries?
Yeah, no, I mean, people keep mistaking me for an advocate of God.
No, I specifically said I understand that. You're not saying that.
Okay, so I don't think...
I'm giving you an example of some countries that don't even participate in the religion by your definition.
Okay, what I'm saying is that
this seems to me that
I think you can be fine. Many people can be fine, but for some people, and I think there's a recent stat was that 80% of people still are religious in this world, and you think religion's going away, and it's not going away.
But actually,
this is my personal opinion. Okay?
Actually, we have examples in Western Europe of religion going away.
Yeah.
We
my
have
personal
examples
opinion is
where the
that
majorities of the population of those countries are non-religious.
All right.
Even by your definition.
Okay. Yeah. And
I'm asking you is: do you see something fundamentally wrong with those countries?
It's
are
not
they sliding into.
Okay. Let me answer. It's not. I'm not talking about fundamentally wrong with that. I'm just envisioning something that might be better. Okay. I'm an advocate of secular humanism without God. Okay. I think we could do better if there's a long history of sociology and social thought talking about the problem in the West. It's not just this rugged individualism is a distortion. Some people have recently talked about Western educated culture as the weirdest society ever. It's just so strange to have such extreme individualism, and that mental health becomes tenuous to the extent that you do that. Everybody's not sick, but the idea there is that there's a part of human nature that's not being nurtured by this rugged individualism.
The three countries that I mentioned, and France is also basically non-religious, are not societies which are notable for rugged individualism.
Well, compared to what? They're all, I guess they're all steeped in the
socialism
Greek,
is what it's called. Yes.
Yeah, but
so here we have
Netherlands. I think you said Netherlands too. That's pretty.
So here we have basically socialist countries that are non-religious, where the majority of the population doesn't participate in what you think is important.
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
I think I didn't. I don't think I was trying to say that unless you had some kind of religion, you'd be suicidal and homicidal. But what I imagine, based on my understanding of human motivation, is that people could be happier, and also could maybe create something that would be a buffer against the urge to go for radical religion, if they created some kind of more corporate, communal.
So your prediction would be that these countries, Denmark be a classic example, eventually are going to become very unhappy because they don't have.
Well, they'll be unhappy. We'll be unhappy if we get, obliterated by a nuclear missile from Iran. But I think that one thing that we can maybe focus on is we can argue about the political structures in the Netherlands or Belgium, but just looking at Canadian society, if we create an alternative to the radical things that we dislike, not only could it be psychologically sustaining for our own participation in them, but it might help to alleviate the appeal of aggressive and militant alternative forms. That's all I'm saying.
Mine's actually more a comment to that gentleman who's just up in the blue cardigan. And I think what he's missing, nothing against him, is that we are all here because we've already thought about this. We realize that, and we don't need, as you were saying, you raised your kids, you don't need a religion that's anti-God, but still a religion. I understand that. That's why we're all here, because we don't need that. But the people who are in the Bible Belt, 100 million Americans, just for example, who do need that apparently, it is good, I suppose, to have an alternate religion out there that preaches truth and ideologies and philosophy. We don't need that, obviously. That's why we're here. But there's a lot of people out there that aren't here. That's why it's a small house.
Right.
Kind of push back.
And in the process of creating it for them, we might even find, hey, that added a bit more joy to my life.
Why not?
Not that your life is not good as it is. You're not doing just fine, actually. And there's a lot of good things about rugged individualism and Protestant, tendency towards doing it yourself. There's, and the sort of scientific progress and the work ethic and not relying on anybody else.
Yeah, well, it's like the Nazis. But look at Hitler, what he did. He managed to rally people who were in depression, were in debt. Their whole economy was destroyed. Their literal infrastructure was destroyed. And Hitler managed to get a common drain and round them up, and not round them up, that's the word, but you know what I mean.
Another example of why people are hesitant about the whole getting people excited thing, because all the examples are, okay, we got charismatic religion.
Yeah.
We got Hitler.
Exactly. Well, exactly.
You really want to go there?
No, but if he was preaching a message of truth, and he could still attract 30 million people to listen to him, it would have been worthwhile. Unfortunately, he was insane. But what you're saying is we need something to tell people out there that there is another option.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think he was maybe moving the same motivational levers, but the malleability of it, unfortunately, was in that direction, right?
Centre for Inquiry, Canada's premier venue for secular humanists, atheists, skeptics, and free thinkers.
This event was hosted by the Centre for Inquiry Canada, an educational charity promoting science, reason, secularism, and free inquiry. CFI Canada coordinates branches and campus groups across the country, runs a public education series, provides secular community services, incorporates cutting-edge multimedia such as blogs, podcasts, and YouTube, and is a regular voice in the press presenting a secular humanist, atheist, and skeptical perspective. Visit us at www.cficanada.ca and contact us at info@cficanada.ca.